Welcome to Friday Night Ghost Frights, a series of real, true encounters and experiences with the paranormal and the supernatural. Ghost tales that will frighten you in the dead of the night. This is Haunted Road Media, and I'm your host, author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. Imagine being lost inside a labyrinth of hallways and hidden rooms. Imagine falling through a trap door into a creepy basement where your host has an assortment of uninviting ideas for you. Imagine being trapped inside the murder castle of Herman Webster Mudgett, better known as H.H. Holmes. Some may not believe the things I'm about to describe, but I assure you that everything I'm about to tell you is absolutely true. It is up to you, dear viewer, as to whether you believe me or not. H.H. Holmes is considered one of the first modern serial killers in the United States, and his building in Chicago was nicknamed the Murder Castle. He confessed to 27 murders, although only 9 have been confirmed, and some contend there may be up to 200. Born Herman Webster Mudgett in New Hampshire in 1861, he was a bright young man with an alcoholic father and a very religious mother, and was subjected to quite a bit of bullying. In one particular childhood incident, he was dragged into a doctor's office and forced in front of a skeleton in order to frighten him. The bullies pressed the skeleton's hands to his face, but at a certain point in time, Herman actually grew comfortable with the situation. He grew fascinated, and actually later said that it helped to cure his fears and entice his curiosity, which soon led to him dissecting animals. While enrolled at the medical school at the University of Michigan, Herman would steal the cadavers from the laboratory, disfigure them, claim they were in an accident, and then collect money from insurance policies he had taken out on these cadavers. He graduated in 1884. Herman bounced around for a while, and where he went, scams, missing people, and even the death of a young boy followed. He finally settled on Chicago in 1886, where he changed his name to Henry Howard Holmes in order to avoid any association with his past troubles. Holmes started working in the drugstore of Elizabeth Horton, and when her husband suddenly died of natural causes, Holmes convinced her to sell the drugstore to him. She soon disappeared, and when asked about her, Holmes claimed that she had gone to California to live with relatives. Soon after, he bought the lot across the street from the drugstore and began construction on the 3-story building that the neighborhood ended up calling the Castle. He constantly hired and fired workers in order to mask his true construction plans for the building. The first floor contained legitimate businesses, including his drugstore and various other shops. The 3rd floor contained mostly rooms for rent and offices, while the 2nd floor was his infamous labyrinth. Through its twisted hallways, it contained 35 rooms, many of which were designed to be killing chambers. And it also contained many staircases and doorways that went absolutely nowhere. Trap doors were scattered throughout with chutes that led straight to the basement. The basement contained instruments in which Holmes would dissect the bodies, clean off the bones, and then reconstruct them and sell the skeletons to local medical schools. During the 1893 World's Fair, which was held close by, there were reported as many as 50 missing people somehow associated with the castle. It's impossible to know how many people suffered at the hands of H.H. Holmes inside of his murder castle, but there are many ways in which he had devised to corner his prey. He locked people in soundproof rooms, and through a master control system in his office, he would turn on the gas to that specific room and asphyxiate them. Some victims, including Annie Williams, who with her sister was conned out of a property in Texas to H.H. Holmes, would find themselves locked in the vault near his office, where he left them to die. The castle also contained a secret bricked room, which could only be accessed through a trap door in the ceiling, and Holmes would drop people down and starve them to death. Holmes favored killing female employees who he had convinced to take out life insurance policies that he would pay the premiums on, but he was also the beneficiary. He had 3 wives, legally married to all 3 of them at the same time, and many mistresses. While the wives lived out their lives long past his, the mistresses suffered at his hands. One particular case was that of Julia Smythe, who was the wife of a man who worked in his pharmacy. When the husband found out about the affair, he left his wife and child there at the castle where they had been living. Julia soon told Holmes that she was pregnant, and he told her that he could perform an abortion, to which she agreed. On Christmas Eve that year, he murdered her with an overdose of chloroform, and later killed the daughter too. The downfall of H.H. Holmes came from an insurance scheme he concocted with his right-hand man, Benjamin Pitezel, who was a down-on-his-luck carpenter and small-time criminal who Holmes could easily manipulate. With the economy in a slump from the panic of 1893, Holmes hit the road with Pitezel and went to Texas to the property there to try to build another castle. When that plan fizzled, they traveled the country running a number of con jobs along the way. Holmes was first arrested in St. Louis for selling mortgage goods, and there he made a mistake. He confided in convicted train robber Marion Hedgepeth his grander scheme of faking his own death and raking in on a large insurance policy. In exchange for $500, he retrieved from Hedgepeth the name of a lawyer he could trust. Holmes was eventually released with some aid from his very confused wife, and he tried to run the scheme, but it didn't work. The insurance company didn't believe his claim. However, he and Pitezel agreed to run the same scheme again, this time with Pitezel faking his own death. Instead, in Philadelphia, Holmes actually killed Pitezel, staging an accident and making the claim on the insurance policy with Pitezel's actual corpse. Back home, Holmes convinced Pitezel's wife, Carrie, that he was actually in hiding, and then took 3 of her 5 children into his own custody. Thus began the strange odyssey of him moving about the country and even into Canada with the 3 children, while simultaneously moving Mrs. Pitezel and the other 2 children on a parallel route. One time in Detroit, they were actually just a couple of blocks from each other, and in another instance, Holmes was actually staying with his wife, and she had no idea of anything that was going on. Back in St. Louis, Marion Hedgepeth, who had not been paid his $500, caught wind of the Pitezel death and coughed up the scheme to which Holmes had confided in him. The infamous Pinkerton detectives tracked down H.H. Holmes in Boston. But when Holmes was finally arrested there and brought back to Philadelphia for the murder of Pitezel and the insurance fraud, the 3 children that were in his custody were not with him. They were missing. It was discovered, and he later confessed, that he had drugged the young boy Howard, dismembered his body, and then burned him in a cottage in Indianapolis. The 2 girls, Alice and Nellie, he had gassed in a trunk and then buried in a basement in a house in Toronto. He was dubbed the Monster of 63rd Street, and when the police raided his castle, they discovered his secret rooms. Piles of human and animal bones mixed in the basement together, bloodied women's undergarments, and the dissection table with dried blood. After an emotionally charged trial, H.H. Holmes was convicted and sentenced to death. He was hung on May 7, 1896, and perhaps in a touch of karma, his neck did not snap. He was strangled to death over 15 minutes as his body continued to twitch, dying in asphyxiation like many of his victims. His body was buried in cement 10 feet deep. As for the murder castle, it was torn down in the late 1930s, and now most of it is just a grassy lot between a post office and an elevated set of train tracks. A portion of the post office overlaps the castle site, and many claim that it's haunted. Parts of an old brick foundation can be found in the basement, and it's rumored to be part of an escape hatch out of the castle. Maintenance workers that have ventured down there have reported strange feelings, and visitors to the post office have reported the sensation of icy fingers, and even a disembodied woman's voice. Before his death, H.H. Holmes wrote that he must be the devil because he was born to be a murderer, and we may never know how many lives he took in his castle from hell, but those lives may still be reaching out to us from beyond the grave today. Thank you for watching Friday Night Ghost Frights. Please let us know what you think of this episode in the comments below. And if you've not yet, please subscribe. I'm Mike Ricksecker. Till next Friday night.